91 years ago this week, people in southwest British Columbia were told to drive on the other side of the street. Left became right. Vancouver Island was a holdout until 1922, when we caught up with the rest of BC on the right side of the road. Bruce Kirkpatrick reports.
The first automobile with a BC license plate was a 1904 Waltham Orient buckboard, owned by John Barnsley of Victoria, manager of the Union Steamship Company, and he drove on the left. So did Walter Scott in his first automobile in Comox in 1910. But at 2 a.m. January 1st, 1922, the law changed. People on Vancouver Island were told to drive on the right, and driving laws changed 91 years ago this week in history.
The first week of January in 1922 was a very nerve-wracking time. We were the last place in Canada to change which side of the road we drove on, and a lot of people didn't know how chaotic it would be.
Plymley Auto on Government Street in Victoria in 1905 was selling cars with steering wheels on the right. That would soon change to the left. In the confusion, perhaps some preferred to stick to the racetrack at Willows in Victoria. It was a time of protest.
There were letters to the editor and older ladies who refused to go out on the first day because it just would be too dangerous.
It must have been confusing, too, for Pearly Sands in his EMF Flanders 20, the first automobile to travel from Seattle to Hazelton in 1911, on the right in the USA, then on the left at the Canadian border. By 1922, he would drive on the right in either country because,
in part to normalize ourselves with the arrival of tourists from the United States. The next year, the first car ferry started arriving, and tourists were already driving up into the Okanagan from places like Spokane.
Elizabeth, an old Model T Ford with 68,506 miles on the speedometer, knows both the left and right side of the road and sits idle now in her garage at the Royal BC Museum. It was a time of crank power.
She has an acetylene tank on the running boards and actually burns the same fuel used for welding to make the light in her headlights. So Elizabeth has had a great history, 10 years driving on one side of the road, and then was part of that transition when Vancouver Island shifted to the way we drive today.
It was a time of horses and horsepower in the early automobile age. Speed limits 10 miles an hour in the city, 15 in the country. People were told to switch from the left side of the road to the right. Behind the Wheel, this week in history.
This Week in History, brought to you by the Royal BC Museum, bringing British Columbia stories together.